On October 21st, 2020, I published my very first video. I played 142 of Nitrome's online games, Part 1. In it, I promised I would spend 4 videos meticulously sampling Nitrome's Flash games in an attempt to figure out whether they stood the test of time. 5 months later, I published the second part, which covered the next set of games and was even longer and more elaborate than the first one. And then, 7 long months later, I gloriously return with a Tetris video. And now I'm here to announce that, well, you've read the title, the retrospective. I'm Xing it. Here's why. If you're only here to know what happened real quick, here's the summary. I'm canceling this series simply because I don't want to make it anymore. And if I'm working on something I don't like, I won't have fun making it. And if I don't have fun making it, it's going to show in the final product, and you won't have fun watching it. At that point, everyone loses, which completely defeats the purpose of even making a video in the first place. Instead, I'll make more content like that Tetris video I released a couple of days before this one. But if you want to know the full story behind this decision, keep on listening because I have a lot of things to say. The original idea was to make some sort of hybrid between Super Bunny Hop's The First Level of Every Sonic Game and Nick Robinson's The Best Game Ubisoft Won't Let You Play. I wanted to make this a kind of marathon that would eventually build up to some kind of grand finale where I could tell some kind of interesting story that you can only see when you play every game on Nitrome's website. But things soon started changing. As I played the games and took notes, my script just kept on getting larger and larger and more redundant. I started fearing that the final video would be boring to watch because it was just a bunch of impressions one after the other. There was no real narrative to keep it engaging. So before I even completed the first part of the retrospective, I was already overcome with doubt. This is a dumb idea, I thought. You've been at this for several months, and odds are no one will watch your hour-long video about Flash games. But it's normal for creators to doubt themselves even if people end up liking their projects in the end. At one point in development, Shovel Knight's developers thought their game was bad, that it was just some cheap knockoff version of Castlevania and Zelda 2 and DuckTales. With that story in mind, I carried on with the project and published it as a pilot. If it tanks, I'll just move on to the next project. And if enough people show interest, I'll make the other parts. And to my surprise, people liked it. As someone who's been a lurker their whole life, it was surreal to receive so many comments and compliments from strangers. And I still want to thank you for those, by the way. You have no idea how much it makes someone's day. So yeah, I guess I'll make parts 2, 3, and 4, and it's all going to build up to that grand finale I had in mind. Now that part 1 is out of the way and that I'm done testing the waters, part 2 should be way easier to make. That is when things started falling apart. Big time. I just started running into unforeseen problem after unforeseen problem, and it wouldn't stop. The biggest one of which was the lack of proper planning and scoping. At first I thought the retrospective was supposed to be one enormous video covering every game from 1 to 142, so I played every game from 1 to 142 while taking a ton of notes that I compiled in a Word document. Then I would use those notes to write full segments for each game and turn that into a script. However, after I had played every game, but before I published the video, I realized that making one huge video would be far too much work. I just couldn't see the end in sight, no matter how much I chipped at the project. That's when I decided to split the project into 4 parts, and it's only when I started making part 2 that these decisions started to bite me in the back. I know hindsight is 20/20 and all, but if you played the games in 2019 and only took some light notes, how can you turn those notes into a full script? Spoiler alert, you can't. I even had to play a lot of part 1 games again because my notes were just too vague. So I took it upon myself to replay, re-record footage, and this time write full impressions for every game featured in parts 2 through 4. All 107 games. And things just went from bad to worse when it dawned on me that, unlike the last time I had played those games, I had a time limit because the venerable Adobe Flash plugin, being on its last legs, would be completely disabled at the end of the year, taking nearly every Nitrome game along with it. The HTML5 ports were not an option. I figured it would take months or even years to have their entire catalog ported. Flashpoint, which aims to preserve as many online games as possible, wasn't an option either, as Nitrome's games were just completely absent from the application. Though I later learned that they actually used to be available in older versions and were eventually removed at Nitrome's request. And I didn't know there were other ways to play Nitrome's games after the end of Flash, as many eventually pointed out to me. So I essentially had 2 months to gather any and all material I would need to complete the entire project. After setting a strict schedule and even making a freaking Excel spreadsheet, meticulously tracking my progress, I managed to pull it off with less than 10 days to spare. Satisfied with my work and convinced the project was finally back on track, I published an update detailing what I had been up to during the 2 months following the first video's release, and I took 2 weeks off the project. Little did I know I was completely omitting a very important detail. I had managed to get the work done, but at what cost? After my 2-week break, I was finally ready to edit part 2 and get it out ASAP. So I started making the intro, and then the first segment, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Working on the project 6 days a week, it didn't take long until fatigue and exhaustion set in. But beyond that, I was starting to have a very scary thought I had never had before. I am sick of talking about Nitrome, and I feel like too many of their games are just not that interesting to play or talk about. Sure, there are a bunch of outliers like Final Ninja and Rubble Trouble and Test Subject and Icebreaker and Ditto, and I guess Double Edged, even though I didn't like it nearly as much as pretty much everyone else did for some reason. But too many of these games are just meh. By then, making part 2 had become an absolute chore to the point where it was starting to have an impact on my attitude as a whole. I was getting increasingly sad and irritable. I wanted to cancel the series and just move on to something else so bad. But I felt like I couldn't do that because I told everyone there would be 4 parts. I told everyone I would cover every game. I started discussing this dilemma with friends and family members alike, and they all advised me to stop working on the project if I didn't believe in it anymore. I kept on saying it wasn't an option, that I had to finish what I had started, that I would lose face if I canceled the project. But they eventually convinced me to let it go. I was nearly done making part 2 and decided to at least complete that before giving up on the project. So I did. On March 14th, 2021, I published the second part of the Nitrome Retrospective, and fans of the first part seemed fairly excited to see it. Even though it was nice to see people enjoying what I was making, I was completely exhausted. I never wanted to talk about Nitrome again. I spent the next 2 months honing my editing skills and learning Blender in the hopes of boosting the production values of my next video. After that, I started exploring what kind of project I could take on next and decided to talk about Tetris's super rotation system, as it's incredibly weird and I always wanted to know more about it. Figured it would make for an interesting video. With my next project, decided it was time to wipe the slate clean and to introduce a new structure for my videos. Instead of being long and redundant like the Nitrome videos, this Tetris video would be short, focused, and to the point. I definitely hit more than a few snags making that video, but It was very obvious to both me and the people around me that I was much more excited to make that than Nitrome. After working on it for the entire summer and all of September, I finally had a complete video in my hands, one that I was quite proud of, if I do say so myself. I published it and planned to take 2 weeks off. That was the plan until I made a complete 180 at the last second and spontaneously decided that I would actually finish the Nitrome Retrospective to be a good boy and to avoid disappointing anyone. I reluctantly pulled out my microphone and started making an update video explaining that no, the project wasn't dead and that I just needed to take some time away from it. That was a lie, and I knew it. I called a good friend of mine for some advice, and he said that he had watched the update and that I sounded very sad in it, that it was clear I didn't actually want to make the next 2 parts. After struggling with this project for 2 years, I knew what I had to do. The best decision is sometimes the hardest decision too. I pulled the update video offline less than an hour after it was published and started writing the script for the video you're watching right now. The Nitrome Retrospective was officially no more. So, what now? Is it all over? Am I done making videos? Is Superclass dead? Of course not. If there was one thing I learned above all else from this experience, it's that I love making videos and that I have no intention to stop making them anytime soon. With that said, I regret to inform you that the odds of me talking about Nitrome or completing the retrospective at any point in the future are slim to none. What I've made so far isn't going anywhere. I'm never going to delete parts 1 and 2, that's for sure. I still like Nitrome, I still have respect for them, and I still like their games, but I don't believe in this project anymore. And it's time to move on. Move on to what exactly? Well, as I've said at the top of this video, to more content like that Tetris video I just made, essays and documentaries about things I find intriguing in gaming. It might be a mainstream game that everyone has played or a small indie game no one has heard of. Either way, don't expect me to make long-form content like the Nitrome videos very often, if at all. It turns out it's just not really my cup of tea. That was a lot. You know, I started this channel striving to be as spotless as possible, to just make good content without any fuss or drama, making things complicated, and in the process I completely forgot that it's okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to change your mind, that people, most of them at least, won't hate you if you lose your way every now and then, and as long as you acknowledge it and learn from your mistakes, it's fine. I have plenty of other cool videos I'd like to make, and I hope you'll stick around and give them a chance the same way you did with the Nitrome Retrospective. Have a wonderful day, and sorry for any inconvenience or confusion I may have caused.